Can acrylic painting be done on fabric? So you have your favorite fabric and a couple of acrylic paints. The big question is, can you do acrylic painting on the fabric? The short answer is yes, absolutely you can. But how? That is what we are going to see in today's video in detail. Hi, this is Modula, the artist behind Modula Creations. Let's get started. I have different types of cloth here. This is a cotton piece of cloth. These cloths are bits of cloth which is collected from the dresses. This is from a crepe dress. Little more shinier. This is a silk cloth. You can see it's very light. This is a banyan cloth. This is the type of the cloth that we have on our t-shirts, leggings, and I also have a jean. So I'm going to paint on different types of these cloths and see how acrylics hold together on these materials. This is the part 1 of the video where we will see how to paint on these different materials with acrylics, and in part 2 of the video we will see how we can set this up for washing, and we will also wash it and see how the acrylic output is on these different types of cloth. Today I am using the Camel Fabrica acrylic colors, the bottle colors that you get. You can also use Fevicryl or any other equivalent acrylic colors. I am not going to use any fabric medium today. We will directly use the bottle paints and see how well acrylics hold on cloth. First, let's start painting on the crepe cloth. The crepe cloth is little lighter than the cotton cloth and little more thicker than the silk cloth. As the cloth gets thicker, it's easier to paint and the bleeding also will be less. So let's see that in detail in this video. As we go, you will know how to paint it in detail. We are going to keep the design very simple, as we are not only going to just paint, we are also going to test if acrylics are good on cloth. I am having a thick cardstock under this cloth so that we can avoid bleeding on the below surface. Whenever you paint on cloth, it's always advisable to have some kind of a cardboard or a cardstock underneath so that it doesn't spill over to the next area of the cloth. For this cloth, I am creating a stem along with smaller leaves and flowers. I am painting the design directly on the cloth without any underlying drawing, but in case you are finding it difficult to paint directly, you can always use a cloth marking pencil which comes in different colors to trace out your design or to draw your design and then paint it. Next one I have started doing on the cotton cloth. Here also I have a cardboard underneath. And this is also going to be a simple flower design, but we are going to use little more of a blending technique to get different colors on the flowers and the leaves. If you are new to acrylics, here is my free guide on color mixing for beginners, which has all the basics and tips for color mixing. You can download it from the link guide.modulacreations.com. I will also leave a link in the description below. When you are working on thin cloths like this, you will always see the paint is little bit sinking inside. That is absolutely fine. There are two ways you can avoid it. If you don't want too much of sinking of the paints, then you can directly use the paint from your bottle. Just by adding a touch of water should do. And in case you are working from the artist quality tubes, which is very very thick, then add enough water to make it work for you. In some cases you will still have this problem. In that case, just go over it one more time with the same paints. So basically you will go one more layer to make it good. So let's do the final blending and finish off the flower here. So once painted, you have to allow it to dry completely, and the back side is like this. It will bleed definitely to a little bit, and that's why we had the cardboard here. Now let's take the next one. Next we will try on the silk cloth. The silk cloth is also very light, so definitely there will be some bleeding there. Again, I'll do a very simple design here. We will go with some bigger leaves and maybe a flower. When you're painting on these different types of cloths, you will come to an understanding that painting on cloth is completely different from painting on canvas. One reason is that in canvas we do the preparations and then we paint on it, or we already get a gessoed canvas on which we paint, so the surface is already prepared. But in case of cloths like this, they have different textures and they are very thin to thick. They are completely fibrous, so you have a lot of things to take into consideration when you are painting on cloth. Since this is a darker piece of cloth, I have started with a very bright green. There are also different ways of painting your darker cloth. I will maybe show it in the next one when we are doing it. But you can directly paint with the acrylic paints on this type of cloths as well, no problem, but you will have more of a sinking in problem. This is a very thin cloth. So what happens actually when you are painting in these kind of thin cloths, it's the paint keeps going down. So I call it sinking in. The paint just sinks in. This is because these kind of cloths are fibrous, porous material. In fact, all cloths are porous, but they differ in their characteristics depending on the cloth material. Each fabric has its own disadvantages and advantages. So once you are really aware of the material and the technical characteristics of it, you will be easily able to identify the pros and cons of using the material to paint, and also how effectively you can paint on it. So you will understand that thoroughly. When you are painting on cloth, do remember that too much of paint causes lot of problems when you are painting on cloth. Always it is advisable to go with very thin layers. Now I have started to paint the second layer. As you can see, the paint is little dull in the flower area. So we will go ahead to do the second layer. I am doing it very thin. The first layer also was very thin layer. I am going ahead to paint with the same color, and you will automatically get it brighter. Even to the other areas, if you feel that it is very dull, you can always go ahead to do the next layer. Now since this is a very light piece of cloth, you can see the exact design on the other side as well as on the thicker cardstock. So just have in mind that if you are using very thin cloths, you will have to definitely have something underneath before you paint, if you are planning to paint it on any flat surface. Now let's start on this. So this is a bunion cloth or the t-shirt cloth. This is also the same kind of the cloth that is used on our leggings. It's little stretchy. Let's try in this now. This is a very dark colored cloth. It's black. So what we are going to do is we are going to do an undercoat. In the last section we saw that without doing the undercoat, but then you also saw the sinking in problems. So to avoid that sinking in problems, we can do an undercoat of white and then do the colors on top of it. Sometimes the sinking in problem actually happens because of the cloth itself, where you cannot help it much. It could be a light color cloth, but it could be very transparent and thin, so the sinking in will happen. So even if you do an undercoat, it is very hard to control the colors there. In that case, go ahead to do the layers as we saw in the previous section. But when you have a very darker color cloth, do a undercoat of white with whatever designs you want, and then do the painting on top of it. So use your colors only on top of this. Now the undercoat has to dry for an hour or two before you start to paint on this. I have done this butterfly with the design that just came into my mind at the time of painting, and I'm going to use browns for the body and yellow and orange for the wings. This orange is the third layer here. I am planning to add one or two more layers. I just want to test it out how these layers hold up after washing. Please ignore the background noise that you are hearing in this video. Actually, it is raining heavily outside, so extremely sorry for that noise that you are hearing in the background. This is a little bit of a thicker cloth than the other cloths that we saw so far. So when you are painting in thicker cloths like this, the spreading ability of the paint is reduced drastically, which means that it does not spread easily and it does not spread quickly as well. One thing you can do about this is to have a base layer like how we are doing it here, having a white layer. Another thing that you can do is to keep your paints more workable by adding a bit of water. Do not keep it very thick and try to spread it on the cloth as thick layers. It's going to crack and it will not look nice. So as I was telling, if it is hard for you to paint, then use water. Definitely to your paint, add water and then do. If you really want a watercolor effect, then that is a completely different thing. Maybe we'll talk it in a different video. But when you wanted it to look more of an acrylic or a fabric color, then this is the way you will do it. Now let's add one more layer. So I'm adding the smaller dots and details over the butterfly. I really wanted to check if it is holding properly even after washing. So I've completed painting in this piece of cloth. This is thicker and as you can see at the back there is very little bleeding. Now let's allow this to dry completely. The next is the jean cloth. Let's take another rough cardstock paper. You can have a cardboard or a thicker sheet as well. I'm going to paint on this jean pocket. So let's take this thick card sheet of paper, fold it according to the jean pocket. It need not be perfect, but then the idea is that it has to go inside the pocket. Here is the fold that we have. Now let's cut this out and insert into the pocket like this. This will allow you to paint the pockets without damaging the back side of it. Even though jean cloth is thicker and sometimes this step may feel unnecessary, but having a cardstock or a thick cardboard underneath will always help from spillover of paints under the cloth. Because this is a thicker cloth, we might not be able to see too much on the back. I wanted to do it on this pocket area. When you are painting in darker color cloths, it's always better to paint in white first and then use the other colors on top of it. Otherwise the paint is going to keep on sinking and you will not get the actual brighter colors. Since this is also a very dark color jean, we will just paint it first with white and then we will do the other colors on top of it. If you are a complete beginner in painting in cloth, then I would suggest you to paint on some basic cotton cloths. These are very easy to paint. You can also choose fabrics which are smooth, natural fabrics, which are also equally easy to paint. Do not choose very hard textured cloth materials because it becomes very tough for you to get started. If your fabric is very new or dirty, then I would always suggest you to pre-wash it so that you can remove the dirt or the chemicals that might interfere with the paint adhesion. Once this is painted, just allow it to dry like this itself. Do not take the paper, let it dry. We will come back after an hour to paint it up. The white itself is very nice on the jean because it is a blue background with a white. But then this is my daughter's jean, so I wanted to make it little more colorful. I am planning to make it like a rainbow color. Let's do it. So I am going to use purples, blues, greens to reds and oranges. As I said earlier, always use thin layers of paint. If you are going to use too much of paint, it is going to cause cracks in the areas where you painted it. Also, the cloth will become too stiff in that particular painting area. Also, when you paint in such thin layers, allow each of these layers to dry completely. It will take some time because you are doing it on cloth, and then paint the next layer. If you are just following all these steps, you will not need any medium to work on the fabric with acrylic paints directly. Now you'll have to allow this to completely dry for 24 hours before we can do anything. You can allow the cardstock to be there while drying. In the next video, I will let you know how to set this and then we will test washing all the cloths. I will also let you know the other types of cloths that you can use acrylics on. If you got value from this video, please click on the like button and help me by subscribing to the channel so that I can reach more people. If you have any questions, please post it in the comment section below. I'll be happy to answer them all for you. Have a great week. Happy painting.